Okay, hello and welcome to the Destination C1 talk on how to deal with job interviews in English. Job interviews in English. My name is Anthony Wilson and I've been working at the British Council for what feels like quite a long time. I started in the early 90s. And I'm going to say just a little bit about myself, not because I'm interested in talking about myself, but because I think it's important in a context like this. Because you've come in walking through the cold December air, where you could be doing something else, to listen to a talk on dealing with job interview questions at the British Council, and perhaps you want to know something about the guy who's standing up talking to you. You know, what right do I have to be standing here? I've been a teacher working for 25 years in the British Council. So what do I know about what can I have to say to help you to going out and get in the competitive, difficult international English world of getting job interviews? The answer is my experience, what I've been doing. I do not have a magic wand, as you well know. Nobody can suddenly give you the solution to producing a perfect performance in a job interview. But what I've found myself doing over the years is quite a lot of what they call business English. Business English often took the form of going and working in companies, on master's programs, doing work in tandem together with the British Council and other educational partners. For many years I worked alongside a human resources consultant, a headhunter as they're more familiarly known. He's more or less retired now. His speciality was healthcare. And for a lot of years, we did a course together, which proliferated into sort of other different kinds of courses. Does anybody, I don't know if there's anybody in the room, come in please. I don't know if there's anybody in a room with a healthcare background. Has anybody ever heard of the EFOS Institute in San Bernardo? You know, somebody's heard about it. And I learnt a lot from him because he constantly was seeing CVs. He constantly was interviewing people. He constantly was helping people with job interview situations. Other situations where I've been on my own, I've worked with students, maybe rather younger students, perhaps recent graduates in banking, finance, law, engineering, people doing master's courses. The interesting thing about all these people is every single one of them, every single man and woman among them, had far greater technical knowledge of their field than I had. I was training them or helping them in communication skills. Various different situations. So, in a sense, this presentation is an attempt to draw on some of that experience. It's a presentation I've given before and streamlined a bit. Every time you give it, you change it. And this is the latest version of it. And I will ask you, again, as I asked you at the beginning, not just with the Spanglish, with the linguistic problems, occasionally to consult with the person next to you. He or she may have a completely different professional background to you. They may see the question in a completely different way. Hello, welcome. They may see the question in a completely different way, and that's fine, that's good. All right? So that's what I'm doing standing here, and I'm going to start before you get to the interview, before you get there. Before you get to the interview, you probably apply for a job probably, certainly. You get your curriculum vitae together. There's a covering letter. You go through a selection process, and wow, you've been shortlisted. They're going to give you an interview. Great. One of the things that is often recommended, I'm not going to go into the design of curriculums and all of that, but one of the things that people often recommend in these things is that you show people that you know where you're going. Here you are, you want to give a good performance, if you like, in an interview. You want to be natural, but you want to show them that you know where you're going. And these are personal statements that are written. This sounds like something out of the covering letter. And I'm going to show you one, and then show you another, and invite you to discuss it with that pleasant, kind stranger that you've probably sat down with next to you. And I want just to see if we can decide which of these two is better. Probably. I propose that one of the two is better than the other, but we'll see if we can agree that. Because if we can agree that it's a kind of premise for the rest of it. All right? So here's the first. I'll read it out just in case anybody's challenged, visually challenged. What it says is, I am a committed and hard-working individual who enjoys a challenge. In addition to strong communication skills, I am able to work effectively in a team. I can also demonstrate advanced problem-solving skills and thrive under pressure. Thrive means I do really well. I love it when I'm under pressure. My drive and ambition ensure I'm a valuable addition to any company. So somebody wrote that. Okay, is that a good statement? It's got some good vocabulary in it. Is that a good statement of your direction, your professional ambition, your goals, your objectives? Just think about that for a moment and say to the person next to you, if you like it, it's a bit like Facebook this, yeah? Like, or don't like, or not sure. Just talk about it for a second.
Well, I think it's
Okay. While you're thinking about this, here is number 2, and I'll read it out just in case anybody has difficulty. Here's statement number 2, and you're comparing it. As a recent graduate with a 2-1 honours degree in media communications, I have undertaken several internships within leading organisations such as Bertelsmann and Times Warner. These placements have enabled me to develop not only specific media industry experience, but also a valuable and transferable skill in this fast-paced sector. All right, that's version 2. You get a feeling for it. The language is great in both. I know, really, the English is, but I'm talking about the strategy. So which do you prefer? Get back with your partner for a second. Okay. very briefly before we move on, give me a feeling. Who thinks the first one is better? That's interesting. Who thinks the second one's better? Okay, second one seems to carry it. I agree. Do we agree for the same reason? If the second one's better, why is it better?
Because of the language that you use and because it has an octave. The other one is like, the first one is like me, and me. And the second one is...
Well, it's the second one's me.
No, but there is, in the second one there is an example.
Bingo, we got it. We've got examples. We've got examples in your experience that link. I think the feeling, the attitude, the style in both is very similar. But the second one, you're giving examples. That's a very important thing. That's something that the less experienced people approaching interviews for the first time kind of don't get. You need to produce practical examples always to support your application. All right, and I'm going to move on from this. All right, now we haven't even got to the questions yet, but I wanted to kind of agree this as a premise that concrete examples are a good idea. And sometimes it can be difficult to think of them. Okay, now let's get to the interview. Some people say that all interviews are similar. No, not similar at all, okay? This is a sketch. Very occasionally I've played it to students. They don't find it particularly funny. But the point of the sketch is that these comedians do an interview as if in prehistoric times, and they're still asking the same sort of questions. But the sketch has a grain of truth. It is very, very strange that in this incredible media world that we live in, the world of communications, the technology revolution that we've lived through in our lifetimes, a lot of us, it's very, very strange that some interviews continue to contain the same questions that people were probably asking in the 1920s. Now, how you deal with them, how you answer them, maybe our skill set has gone up, we'll see. But there is something, I think the joke is valid. The joke is valid, but of course we're in the 21st century now. Life's got more complicated. And I think all interviews, as you would say, are not the same. But preparation, and preparation. Think in advance of as many typical questions as you can, but typical questions that would be relevant to you. So in preparing for an interview, I'm going to suggest that you need to be as professional as possible and you need to do a lot of homework. A lot. And that homework might very well involve getting professional help from people who know about your sector. Now there's I don't know, 20, 25 people in this room. I would guess, from my experience, there are probably at least 8 or 10 different professional sectors in the audience. There's no substitute for some specialist knowledge within the sector. Come in, welcome. So prepare, and also this stuff here, there are books you can use. Do I dare use this? Yeah, all right. See that one there, Job Hunting, English for Job Hunting. It's not an absolutely up-to-date edition, but it's called English for Job Hunting, but it hasn't been reprinted. And you can get it in booksellers. It comes with a CD still, but it's a book which helps, it's probably angled more at younger people, maybe recent graduates, preparing for an interview, a job selection process in English. So you've got a book that helps you. It's got lots of listening. it's got a lot of generic questions in it. You don't need that. You've got the internet, and I want to say a little bit more about that in a moment. So there are published resources, aren't there? Have a browse at the books. I like this book here. I've actually used it a few years ago. I gave it as a class set to a fairly young class, fairly inexperienced class on a master's, and we worked through some of it. It's the only time I've ever done it. I would wish there was a slightly more up-to-date book. Maybe there is, but I don't know it. I looked recently. But that's something, if you're particularly interested both in skills and in language at the same time, you could work on, with a book, you can work on something like that. Or you look at other resources. YouTube. Very, very old resource. YouTube seems to be here to stay. YouTube's part of our culture. YouTube it's enormous. Has anybody ever consulted YouTube for job interview questions? Anybody ever done it? Yeah? Do you get the impression there's an answer for everything?
I don't think that you can ever imagine that they are going to ask you. Never.
Right. Now, this question, is there really a YouTube video for every imaginable interview? You almost get the feeling that there is. And I'm going to say, use your common sense. Be careful. Be careful. Because I've put 3 reasons there, at least, and I'd like to go through them. Be cautious with self-styled interview gurus. I'm talking about Mr. or Ms. who does a talking head video of themselves on YouTube, telling you all you need to know, the definitive way to answer this question is this way. Be careful. Look at least, if you're looking for that question, look at a lot of examples. And I'm going to say something that sounds a little bit romantic, a little bit corny just now, but listen to your heart. If you're thinking, I'm not connecting with this, that is, it's telling you something. Because what matters, your context, your culture, and your professional sector, there is a slightly different culture of interviews across the Atlantic in the United States than over here in Europe. Most of the people on YouTube, most of the gurus are American and North American. Does it matter? Well, it depends. It depends. Again, look at a lot. Don't just listen to me. Look at a lot of examples. Get a feeling. What fits with you, with your own sector? Anything could be good. Anything can give you ideas, but it's your interview. It's a unique thing, and you look at a lot of things on YouTube, and you probably just a little bit of that, a little bit of this, but there's not going to be one great answer that grabs you. Or maybe there is. Maybe there is, but look at a lot of other ones first. That's what I would say. Because YouTube is the single biggest resource that I know of its kind for interview questions. There are other things, about.com, there's a lot more. The problem that you have is not lack of information, but how to choose. All right, so I'm going to suggest to you typical questions, typical answers isn't a good idea. Okay, I'm going to suggest that every question that they ask you in an interview is an opportunity. But it's also potentially what? That's a banana skin. You can slip up and fall over. You can lose the job, lose the opportunity on one careless or wrong answer. an interview is not a real, normal conversation. Does everybody agree about this? You want to be natural. Maybe it's you're with your future boss or future colleague or manager. It's not a normal conversation. Interviews for organizations, private and public, are phenomenally expensive. It costs a lot of money to set up a selection procedure. And your guys are doing that instead of working on something else. So it's a big potential waste of time. So it takes a lot of setting up, company time and all the rest of it, company time and, or school time or organization times, whether it's public or private sector. So every question that they ask you is not just a casual question. It's a question which is an opportunity. But every question carries dangers as well. Now, going back, I've got here, in a minute, we'll look at the clock. I'm going to show you 4 sets of random questions. I made a selection. These are questions that people agree they're typical interview questions because, in my experience, everybody recognizes them. And they're the kind of questions, look, in a normal conversation, imagine yourself having a normal conversation with somebody, would they say, how would you summarize your CV? What do you know about our company? What kind of boss do you like to work with? Tell me something you failed at. Doesn't really sound like a normal conversation. And even if it does, it's still an interview. So you need to remember that. Okay, now, we've already said, haven't we, that examples are a good idea. So that's one idea we've kind of established. All right, I'm now going to give you a couple of minutes, get together with the person next to you, choose 1 or 2 of those questions, okay? How would you summarize your CV? What do you know about our company? If it's not a company, substitute the word school. If it's not a school, if it's public sector, our organization. All right? Doesn't matter what it is, but it's the same question that people ask, all right? So what would be a good answer to any of those? And this really is a matter of opinion. I'm going to leave this quite open-ended, but I'd like you just to talk to each other for a moment about this, in Spanish or English, whatever you're more comfortable with, all right? Okay, now I've got some more. Let's look at a couple of these and see how we're going, because I'm going to throw a few more at you. So it's not a question of giving definitive answers, but the first one, how would you summarize your CV? It sounds a little bit like an invitation for the personal statement, but given orally. So show them that you know where you're going, but that you've got skills that are particularly related to this job. Everything's about this job. And I gave, for the first one, I gave a kind of hint, perhaps, of where your thinking should perhaps be taking you. The second one, okay, what do you know about our company? Right. If they ask you that question, what do they want to know?
Did you know the sector?
Right.
Did you take your time to know something about the company?
Okay. If you've taken your time to find out something about the company. Okay, is it a good thing to give somebody a very, very long answer for that? You can try to give too much detail, because the more you talk, the more you're going to be talking as an outsider, and you're telling an insider about his or her company or school. On the other hand, they want to know that you have been, maybe that they want to see that you are interested. Now, there's different parts of this. Suppose the interview has been at short notice and you haven't really had time to find out much. You really don't know much about this school, organization, company. What would you say then? You just haven't had time. The interview was at short notice.
Just give them a couple of details of the company. Or
If it's an important in the
I haven't
sector,
had the
for example.
opportunity to search for the information.
Okay. What they are looking at is not so much the content of what you say, but how you deal with the question. So I would make it clear in that situation that normally you are extremely thorough and professional, but you just haven't had time on this occasion. And perhaps tell them something, but maybe think of an interesting question or two to get a little bit of dialogue going with the interviewer. And you've got to put everything in context. There's if you've had a long time to prepare for this interview, I expect you to know something. But don't just come, I don't want to just hear a monologue. Perhaps in that monologue, in what you say, be clear about what you're not absolutely sure about. There's one thing is what you know, and then what you don't know, and that's not your fault, what I would be interested in knowing. So it's an opportunity for you not just to show that you've worked hard to get to this interview, but that you're still interested. You're alive to hearing new things, I would suggest there. Always use opportunities to get dialogue with the interviewer, to make it more natural, because you're actually closing the gap. Okay, the third one, all right, what kind of boss do you like to work with? All right, again, if they ask this question, I'm going to make a suggestion. We can have a long there's not time for a long discussion on this. But I learnt this years ago from my colleague who was an HR consultant. Okay. He suggests, and I think he's right, don't give a long shopping list of attributes. I want my boss to be approachable, kind, good-humoured. I want them to be a good leader who's going to develop me, and a whole lot of other things. Fair. I want my boss to be somebody that I can trust, etc. A long list of attributes, and well, possibly good-looking. I mean, wait a minute. The longer your list for the ideal boss, what is the problem?
that's not going to match.
The person behind the desk is beginning to feel increasingly threatened. In reality, it's not a real question. It's a mirage. Really, I suggest in a lot of, we're all human. We all gravitate more to certain personality types than others. What do you think? What do they want to know here, really?
If you have emphasized with people, if you can work with different kind of people,
If you match with the values of the company.
Show that, and that probably you are good at working with different types of people. Because you're still on the outside. You don't really know what it's like in that staff room, or in that marketing room, or wherever it is. You don't really know. They want you to be adaptable. If it's a nice boss, well, great. And so that's, but of course, tell a story. Show that, don't just say, I can work with everybody, because that's probably rubbish. So don't tell them what, or a much better answer would be is that in your experience, you've worked with a wide range of people, if you have. If you're on the younger end of things, at university, don't just say, well, I don't know, I haven't worked, which quite a few of my students used to say. Say, I think I'm quite adaptable because I've adapted to different teachers, different styles. There's always something that you can say that shows you're adaptable to different people, that you're easy to get on with. That's what I'm suggesting. That's behind the question. All right? And I'm going to skip over the last one and move on and go to another set. All right? And, all right, have another, what we'll do, we'll look at this. Okay, 2 minutes, maybe choose just one of those questions. Again, with your partner, what do you think about those? What would be good? Always remember, I'm suggesting that you think of these things not as real questions. The question has a form. If they say, what do you know about us? There's actually something else behind us. What kind of boss do you want to work with? Do you like to work with? There's something behind the question. How well do you work in a team? Yeah? Okay, just talk about that for a moment. Okay, very little bit more briefly now, because again, there's not time to. I want to, before the end of the session, I want to go back to the language problems in interview questions. How well do you work in a team is my personal favourite, in quotes, because it sounds like this innocent little question, and it's awful as a question because people say, yeah, I work pretty well in a team. And that's it. Wait a minute, what's missing? There's an example. You need to tell them a story that's relevant to the company, obviously, and you need to tell it in good English. But that's one thing. And it's such... This is where, in real life, you don't. In a natural conversation, it's not a sales pitch. You're not selling. You're just being yourself. Here, be yourself, but you have to remember to sell. The same goes for the situation where you showed initiative and your greatest strengths. Tell some kind of story which supports it. Probably something which shows skills, qualities, which are commensurate, which fit the job being advertised. Where you see yourself in 5 years' time, what they want to know is, do you have a sense of where you're going? And again, it goes back to that personal statement. You need to have some kind of personal statement, some kind of sense of where you're going, and really, really, honestly, why you want this job. Do you just want a job? Why do you want this in 5 years' time? Because where will I be in 5 years' time? Still alive, I hope. It can be a very difficult question to answer, but show that you've got some idea of progression. I think where you see yourself in 5 years' time, there's another element in there. I don't know if you discussed that one. I think it's a very good thing to stress that you love your work. You actually like what you do. I like teaching. I like my job. And some people do like their sectors. They actually forget to say this in interviews. And the idea of learning and development, all right. Does anybody want to ask anything? I want to move on to another set because there's a couple more. I'm starting to accelerate slightly because of the time. Does anybody want to say anything? Okay. I'm moving on to the next. All right, those, okay. The last question, just the last question. Are you free to travel? Imagine if you get that question. Long answer or short answer? Short sounds better, doesn't it? Yeah, right. Obviously, if you're not globally mobile, you need to be honest about it. Clearly. Okay, right. Let's take a different approach. Question number 2. How well do you work under pressure? Okay, forget job interviews for a moment. Just turn to the person next to you and be honest. How well do you work under pressure? Okay, I'm going to suggest here. Now, this is one question that it is good to ask yourself. All of us kind of know this. Pressure, stress happens. Nobody likes too much work. Nobody really thrives when they've got too much to do to be effective. It's about how you manage that situation, and I suggest there's something else going on here. If they ask you a question like, what kind of decisions do you find difficult to make? How well do you work under pressure? All of these questions are also inviting you, I suggest, to do something else and maybe show something else. What might that be? Yeah, examples, yeah. But show that you are capable of what?
Problem solving.
Maybe problem solving. You've got these skills, yeah. But then tomorrow there's a new problem and you're not so good at solving that. They want to see, right, if you're proactive, sure, yeah, proactive, efficient, good time manager, I always prioritize, all the rest of it. I think they want something else as well, that you have a capacity to self-assessment, reflection, right? That can you really reflect? One of the hardest things for us to do is to answer questions like, how would your friends describe you? Because really, it's a trick question. We can't. But we can think about situations that we've been in, show us the positive side of ourselves, and show perhaps what we learnt from that situation. Self-reflection, I'm not going to, I didn't do so well in that situation, but I really learnt from it. That failure was very beneficial and so on. But think of something that doesn't sound as if it comes straight out of the microwave. Think of something that has the ring of truth, that's a real example for you. But the idea of reflection is an absolutely fundamental part of this interviewing process. It's not that you're just, you can give examples and that you've got all these wonderful skills, but that you are somebody who can say, maybe I was wrong there. Maybe I can move on. Show that you are a learner. It's very much a learning business, this. And that capacity to learn is one of the things, a sort of substratum I think you've got to be transmitting. Now I'm looking quite carefully at the clock because I want to go back to the Spanglish in a moment. There's another question here. The first one. How good is your English? And the person says, well, as you see, I've got level C1 or B2, whatever. Yeah, wait a minute. Okay, I can see that. How good is your English? Now, just how would you deal with that? Talk about that for a moment.
Set of
This one, I'm not sure you get so many hits on YouTube with this one. This particular one, right? Okay, now I'm going to suggest for a moment, just this is again another. I'm probably leaving you with more questions than I am statements. I'm going to suggest that you think European. You think about what language levels are. If you think about A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, if you look at what all of those means, all of that description of language is set up by what we call descriptors. In other words, what you can do in English. How good in your English? Okay, I can see that you've got this mark, this grade in IELTS. Maybe you've passed the Cambridge Advanced. Could you negotiate in English? Could you do this, that, and the other in English? Could you teach mathematics in English? I get a surprising number of people with this. Okay, obviously, they can see your English qualification, your English level will be on your CV. And obviously, you need to tell the truth. Well, obviously, because you will be found out if you don't, clearly. But particularly if your English level, you think, isn't quite as good as this particular position would like, that's the moment when you emphasize your experience. Look, I had to deal with a lot of American colleagues who didn't speak any Spanish. Show things that you've done in English. It's what you can do and have done. It comes down to examples again, all right? And I'm going to wrap up now. I'm going to conclude and go briefly back to the linguistic side, since this is, after all, the British Council. So, but I'm going to suggest that there are basically 8 parts, 8 aspects of a strong answer. And you can say, is that 8 or 9 or 7? And I suggest that we know all this already. It's a question of checking the boxes. Number 1 is really unhelpful, neither too short nor too long. You've got to know, haven't you? Are you free to travel? Maybe a 10-minute answer is not good unless there's an issue. If you are not sure if you've said enough, your kind of dog sense gives you a feeling that maybe the interviewer would like to hear a bit more and you can't think of anything else to say, what could you do?
Maybe ask.
Yeah. Have I answered your question? Would you like me to say a little bit more about da-da-da? Actually, invite that little bit of dialogue. Okay, the point where you feel you are going and how it fits with this particular position. Examples we talked about. Be well structured. In English, Spanish, whatever language. You don't just want to talk and talk and talk. And sometimes people get very nervous and they talk very fast and rather incoherently. You don't want to do that. Where are the pauses? So you give the sense of having an ordered, focused approach. Of course, there are a few more. Good English. Yes, you do want to work in English, and we will finish up with the language errors. Good English, though, could also be pronunciation. I'll show you some grammar problems. But pronunciation, if you say known when you mean noun, if you say cat when you mean caught or something, your pronunciation is letting you down. That might be more important than having proficiency level grammar. So good English matters comes back to communication skills, I think. And always indicating that you've got resources you can learn, all right? So there's 8 things, and then I've tried to boil them down even more. Would everybody agree with these? Yeah? It's kind of, we sort of know this stuff. The question is applying it, even in your own language. It all comes down to that, what I said at the beginning, 360 degrees. Your preparation should be a professional business. Go and see a consultant who specializes in your sector. Get professional help if you need it. Might make all the difference to a career change. But be yourself. It's no good trying to act your way through this. You don't want a job in which you'll be acting. You want a job that is in which you're going to be able to be you, obviously a professional, careful version of yourself. Enjoy it. Enjoy. Anthony, are you serious? Yeah. Try to enjoy the process. It is, and if this is the rapport with the interviewer, try to be as pleasant as possible. Now, there are interviewers who just on principle, because of standardization, are going to be very, very cold. And they won't really want to smile very much. That doesn't matter. That's probably what the company or the organization is doing. Another person might be absolutely delightful, but really his or her smile is a basilisk smile. And after 2 or 3 weeks, there's still silence. You can't really judge the behavior of the interviewer, how well it's gone. It's not like a real conversation in that way. But you can enjoy, and you do get a feeling. Obviously, you do get a feeling. Never lose sight of the point. The point. This job, and your point, it's a point, but it's a moving point. It's direction, isn't it? Every single question they ask you is not random, even if you can't think about what the reason is. Try to get behind the question a little bit. Learning. Reflection. I don't expect you to be perfect, but if you make a mistake, I don't expect you to carry on. Keep making the same mistake. Above all, look, it is a game. And some people hate interviews, and I have a lot of sympathy with you if you do hate interviews, because it's an artificial situation. But I suggest that having a positive attitude, I'm sorry, you've heard rather a lot about positive attitudes, but it's a game. Learn to play it. You lose this one, tomorrow there'll be another opportunity. And while you're playing the game, enjoy it as much as possible. But try to see the whole picture of what's behind those questions. All right? And I'm just going to come out of here for a moment and go very, very briefly into the Spanglish. I can't see what I'm doing. Into the Spanglish. All right. Which, okay, it's up there. Okay. Before we get onto this, and I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, are there any questions? Does anybody want to ask? Make any comments? It's about seeing that whole picture, and it's very interesting, all this sort of stuff. When I entered the job market, I went to a good university, and then I went in, I've always worked in education. I had absolutely no idea how to approach interviews, what an interview was, what was it. I learned all that much, much later, ironically, when I was working. And I found myself faced with people, particularly where there didn't seem to be very many jobs going, who were in this situation where they desperately needed a job, and very often that job depended on English as well. So English was really important, and it was quite difficult for me to stand there and think, well, I had very little idea when I was your age. Now you're coming into the job market. You've got to know much more. You've got to be much more streetwise than me. Briefly on these, I got very good notes in my bachelor. Let's just improve them a little bit. What would sound a bit better? All right. Okay. And just those, just a little bit of language work. Okay. The bachelor, are you talking about your BA degree? Or your marks or your grade? How good is your English? Right. Be careful of things like saying no del todo. It's not entirely. Not at all, which is in absoluto, which is another thing. And this is the kind of mistakes you can make under pressure. Profits, not benefits, and so on. There are quite a few there, and I'll give these out. This is a handout at the end. And I haven't, so this is for you to take away rather than to go through now. Thank you very much for coming. And if you are in interview processes in English, very good luck. I hope that maybe something I might have said might be useful for you. Thank you.